Welcome back to your newest obsession, the NeuroSpicy MomPod. I'm your host, Austin Marie, Scorpio stellium, recovering elementary school teacher, psychology degree holder with a minor in saying inappropriate things at the wrong time, and a decade-long deep diver into all things neurodivergence, nervous system, and the weird magic that is our language. If you've been here since the beginning, you know that this podcast started out as a how to parent your neurospicy kid without losing your mind vibe. But lately, I've realized that the real work is reparenting ourselves, especially those of us who grew up undiagnosed, trying to navigate a world that wasn't built with our brains in mind and without the tools, the language, or the supports that we needed. And here's the thing that no one really talks about. Neurodivergent brains are not less than. In fact, we often have way more neural synapses firing, which means we're taking in way more data at any given moment. We are like high-speed, high-performance processors, and the problem isn't our hardware. It's that the user manual we were handed growing up was written for an entirely different machine. Today, we're going to talk about something that's been everywhere on the news lately, AI. I want to zoom in on the use of AI as an emotional and communication ally for neurodivergent people. On the surface, it sounds incredible. Real-time social scripting, emotional regulation prompts, someone or something who won't roll their eyes when you say, I literally cannot answer this email without spiraling into an existential crisis. For a lot of folks with ADHD, autism, or dyslexia, tools like ChatGPT and NeuroTranslator have been game changers. But because I'm a Scorpio and therefore genetically incapable of letting things be uncomplicated, we are going to dive into the pros and the cons. We're not just talking about, will this make me lazy, or what happens if I start preferring AI to my actual friends? No. I want to talk about the environmental cost, the fact that these tools don't just live in the cloud. They live in massive, energy-hungry data centers that require enough water to hydrate an entire city. And when you factor in climate collapse, environmental justice, and the reality that disabled and neurodivergent people are already disproportionately impacted by environmental stressors, well, suddenly, this shiny AI helper looks a little less sparkly. Now, because I'm me, we're also going to zoom out into the woo side of this, because words are magic. Neuroscience actually backs this up. Neuroplasticity shows us that the language we use literally reshapes the pathways in our brain. But magic, like AI, comes with responsibility. And the question becomes, is this the kind of magic we actually want to use, and at what cost? So let's light a candle, pour something comforting, and get into it. Let's start with the big draw here. Why do so many neurodivergent people light up like a serotonin Christmas tree when they first use AI? First, the neuroscience. Many neurodivergent brains, especially ADHD, autistic, and dyslexic brains, have more neural synapses and heightened connectivity between certain brain regions. That means we are constantly taking in more sensory and informational input at once. A 2020 study in Nature Neuroscience found that autistic participants showed increased local connectivity in sensory and association cortices, which may explain heightened perception and attention to detail. Sounds great, right? And it is, but it also means our processors can overheat. Our nervous systems are basically running at Formula One speeds on a track designed for minivans. AI offers something magical to a brain like that: instant scaffolding. It can take a flood of chaotic thoughts and help us sequence them. It can hold the social scripts that neurotypicals seem to be born with knowing. Everything from how to word an email so it doesn't sound weird, or how to gracefully exit a conversation. There's a real psychological comfort in that, especially for people who've spent years masking. There's also a nervous system angle here. Hello, polyvagal theory. Now, I want to be clear, it is a theory and not an absolute law of human functioning. But the general idea that our vagus nervus helps us regulate whether we feel safe, socially engaged, shut down, or in fight or flight, it lines up with a lot of lived neurodivergent experience. Predictable, non-judgmental interactions, like with AI, can signal safety cues that keep our vagus nerve in a social engagement state instead of threat mode. That means we think clearer, speak easier, and self-regulate better. And then there's the executive function piece. When you live in a brain that's constantly processing sensory input, managing work memory overload, and navigating emotional hypersensitivity, even simple tasks can snowball into, I can't do this right now. AI can feel like a personal assistant that never sighs or looks impatient. No wonder it feels like a breath of fresh air. So to sum it up, our neurodivergent brains are like high-performance engines. They take in more data, process faster, and pick up on subtleties other people might miss. AI feels like a perfect co-pilot because it helps us organize the chaos, scaffold our ideas, and give us a non-judgmental space to think out loud. It can reduce sensory and social load, free up mental bandwidth, and make daily life just feel a bit easier. But like any tool, there's a shadow side. Just because something feels effortless doesn't mean it's without cost, especially when you zoom out beyond the personal benefits. There are real questions about what we trade away when we outsource so much to a machine, and about the very real environmental and social price tags that come attached to that convenience. Next, we'll talk about the hidden cost of AI, from the massive energy it devours to the subtle ways it can rewire our relationships with ourselves and the world around us. All right, we've talked about why AI feels like a weighted blanket for the brain. Now, let's talk about the fact that it's a weighted blanket with a pretty big electricity bill stitched into the lining. Here's the first big one: environmental cost. AI doesn't live in the cloud. It lives in massive, humming, energy-gobbling data centers that could double as Bond villain layers. According to a 2023 University of Massachusetts study, training a single large AI model can emit as much carbon as 5 cars over their entire lifetimes. And that's just the training. Running the model day to day, that's a whole other tab on Mother Earth's energy bill. Water usage is another sneaky part. Those servers need constant cooling, and in some facilities, that means millions of gallons of fresh water a day. Picture a small town. Every drop of water it uses in 24 hours, that's what's being poured into keeping AI's brain from melting. And this isn't just a hypothetical. Small towns in places like the Dalles, Oregon, and Mesa, Arizona, are already reporting strain on their local water supply because nearby data centers are pulling from the same reservoirs. What's wild is that while listening to one of my favorite podcasts, Breaking Points, I heard these companies openly acknowledge their massive water use, but their plan of action is basically to hope that AI itself figures out a way to fix the problem. So they're banking on the idea that the very technology causing the strain will magically solve it. And the kicker? Many of these facilities are in drought-prone areas, meaning the very tech that's helping you compose that perfectly diplomatic Slack message is also competing with local communities for their drinking water. Now, here's where it gets extra tangled for neurodivergent folks. Climate change and environmental stressors don't affect everyone equally. People with sensory sensitivities, chronic health issues, or anxiety tied to uncertainty often experience climate stress more intensely. There's actual research linking air pollution and heat exposure to increased cognitive load and emotional dysregulation. In other words, the more we strain our planet, the harder daily functioning gets for the very people AI often helps the most. Then there's the psychological cost. AI became a sort of emotional crutch. And I say that with full empathy because sometimes that crutch is the only thing keeping you from face planting. But we have to be mindful of the learned dependency loop. If our brains start outsourcing too much problem solving, language generation, and manipulation, we risk dulling those pathways from underuse. It's like never using your core muscles because you've got a corset holding you up. It feels great until you try to stand without it. And finally, the woo warning. Words are magic, yes, but AI words aren't neutral magic. They're generated from a giant stew of human content, which means the biases, the assumptions, the cultural programming baked into the internet also gets baked into the answers. When you're neurodivergent, you've already had a lifetime of navigating systems that misunderstand you. AI can feel like a safe ally, but it's not immune to parroting the same ableist or dismissive patterns the real world has thrown at you. So where does that leave us? In a classic neurodivergent conundrum, holding two truths at once. AI can be an incredible accessibility tool, and it can also contribute to environmental harm, increased dependency, and subtly reinforcing the very biases that we've been working to dismantle. All right, now that we've unpacked the ups and downs of relying on AI as neurodivergents, let's talk about how all this tech interaction shows up in our bodies and how we can reparent ourselves to navigate it better. First up, AI can feel like a superpower for our brains. It offloads decision fatigue, provides predictable scaffolding, and sometimes even feels like a calming friend who always has the right answer. For our nervous systems, always on high alert, that predictability can be a relief, like giving your internal GPS a fresh update after years of glitches. But here's the kicker. Leaning too hard on AI can also mess with that mind-body connection. When we outsource emotional regulation or problem solving to a machine, our autonomic nervous system can get a little lazy or confused. Imagine trying to build muscle but always relying on a scooter to get around. It feels easier at first, but over time, your core strength weakens. Interoception, the body's way of telling us what's going on inside, can get dulled when AI smooths over every bump. If your brain starts tuning out your body's signals because the AI is handling it, you might miss important cues about stress or overwhelm until you hit a shutdown or meltdown. This is where reparenting becomes essential. It's about consciously tuning back into those body signals, retraining your nervous system to notice and respond, not just react or shut down. And yes, AI tools can be part of that toolkit, but they can't replace the work of listening to yourself and building self-trust. Here's the cool part. Combining neuroscience and the woo, mindfulness, breath work, energy healing, herbal rituals, it can help you calm your nervous system and strengthen that mind-body connection. These tools give you a way to ground yourself when the tech world feels overwhelming or too much. But, and it's a big but, we have to be mindful about how much we rely on AI because the environmental and psychological costs we talked about earlier, they come back to our bodies. Climate anxiety, sensory overload, and tech fatigue all feed into the nervous system dysregulation. So caring for your body and your mind means balancing tech use with grounded self-care. And at the end of the day, reparenting yourself isn't about rejecting technology or pretending it's all good or all bad. It's about creating a dance where you're in the driver's seat using AI to support, not replace, your own incredible neurodivergent brain and body. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, friends. I hope today's deep dive gave you some new ways to think about your neurodivergent brain, AI, and how we can all gently reparent ourselves in this wild, wired world. If you want to keep this conversation going and get access to the video episodes, exclusive bonus content, and my unscripted real-life updates before the episode drops, plus our vibrant community chat boards, please come join the NeuroSpicy squad over here on Patreon. Just a real quick heads up, when you subscribe, do make sure that you are subscribing on a desktop computer and not your phone or tablet. Apple likes to sneak in a little fee that just goes straight to them, and we want to make sure that every penny of support is going to the NeuroSpicy space that we're building together. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for your support. It means the world to me, and it keeps this podcast alive and thriving. All right, that's it for now. Sending you all the love and all of the light, and of course, ta-ta.